Good evening, everyone. Let us start straight away our class, Organon of Medicine, aphorisms. Yesterday we completed the first block, that is from 1 to 4, that is called Ideal Cure. We discussed about the physician, what's his mission and what is not his mission. We discussed about the idealism of cure. Then we discussed about 5 if for the physician, the essentiality to be rational and judicious physician. One more point regarding the aphorism 4 is regarding its evolution. If we see in appendix 4, in appendix aphorism number 4, you will be surprised to see that this aphorism number 4 the first 4 editions, 2 paragraphs come in here. The following is the final shape that assumed in the 4th edition. So if you see the appendix up to the 4th edition of the Organon, it was quite a big aphorism having a very long footnote. Those who are interested, they may go ahead reading this. But then I'm just to tell that this is how Master Hahnemann made necessary changes in the forthcoming editions. You can just see that how such a big, compared to the present 4th aphorism, it is containing 2 paragraphs when he is writing aphorism 5 and aphorism 6. That means that these were the aphorisms, these were the 2 paragraphs. Later on, they became somewhere the part of aphorism 5 and aphorism 6. But earlier, up to 4th edition, these 2 paragraphs were aphorism 4 only, and then it was having quite a long, even more than a page footnote. So this is just in quick reference regarding the evolution of aphorism 4. Then it's the time to go ahead in our voyage to the next level. The next level is from the 5th aphorism. What we can say that you can write down yourself that from the 5th aphorism to the 18th aphorism, these complete block of the aphorisms, say some 13, 14 aphorisms, what are they talking about? They are talking about the knowledge of disease. And in that, from 5th to 8th is 5, 6, 7, 8th aphorism. It is regarding a blueprint of case taking, blueprint of case perceiving. Generally, when we simply very shallow way talk about Organon, it is said that we are going to have the case taking from 82 to 104. Yes, it is. But you see, the plan is already there in, blueprint is already there in aphorism 3. So in that, the first point was knowledge of disease. So up to 70, Hahnemann is going to talk about each one of those 5 if: knowledge of disease, knowledge of power of medicine, and all those 5 points. Then That includes the aphorism 4, because one if is there, preserver of health. Now, what Hahnemann is doing regarding the aphorism 3, uh, he is going to talk here in a number of aphorisms with the footnotes regarding the principles in respect of knowledge of disease, regarding the principles in respect of knowledge of power of medicine, regarding in respect of the clearly defined principles, the he's going to discuss all the principles part, the doctrinal part of all this. And the same way, then, when going into the practical part, he's going to talk us about knowledge of disease. In that, we should be knowing that how to understand the disease. There we come to know what is acute disease, what are the varieties of acute disease. Similarly, chronic disease, in that varieties of it, and thereafter we'll just have case taking and like this. So it is a arrangement in the organon in such a fashion that now here you're going to get some principles understanding on what ground the practical part is uh, going to be working. You are to think that until and unless you decide the principles here regarding the knowledge of disease, you cannot practically work. This is the whole arrangement. Because when you're doing something very practical, they're telling about the methodology, telling about the steps, takes a longer time, means they are having number of aphorisms more than what you're taking here in telling the principles about it. That is why this is not required to be matched. This can be. So here what we are going to get is regarding the knowledge of disease, that is from 5 to 18, and in that you can subdivide it further into two blocks. The first one is aphorism 5, 6, 7, 8. Four aphorisms. These four aphorisms are regarding the blueprint of case taking, blueprint of case perceiving. If we leave these four aphorisms in respect of case perceiving, whatever maybe we read regarding the case perceiving in aphorism 82 to 104, those cannot be very well applied. That is why, just keep in mind, now he started telling us the principles part regarding the knowledge of disease 5 to 18. From 5 to 8, Hanman is going to teach us regarding the case taking part, that means the doctrinal part of case taking, that is the blueprint of case taking. And from 9 to 18, it is going to teach us the very, very vital part, that is the doctrine of vital force, only in respect of understanding the health, disease, and cure. This is what we are going to understand from 9 to 18. So just keep yourself focused 5 to 18, and in that, the first portion 5 to 8, it is going to talk us about the blueprint of case checking. Then, what is there in the blueprint of case checking? I tell you. In blueprint of case checking, aphorism 5 is going to teach us regarding the cause of the disease. best will be you can write down on your aphorisms. Then aphorism 6 is going to teach us regarding the portrait of disease. Aphorism 7 is going to teach us totality of symptoms. So far, it is given the impression, it is understood that the portrait of disease and the totality of symptoms are one in the same thing, but not like this. They are the two different things. They have a difference. We, as a homeopathic physician, should be able to learn that difference. And then in the eighth of the aphorism, we will be knowing regarding the restoration of the health. So this is what we are targeting in our today and forthcoming classes, the four aphorisms. We will go in a very steady manner without any kind of hurry and try to understand, because now everything is set. We understood that what was happening for last 2500 years in the name of curing the patient, robbing of the patient was going on. Then what is the requirement? The physician has to work in a mission mode, and in that mission mode he should be able to pick up that what is the concept of cure, what is the ideal of cure. The very important aspect of the idealism of cure is that it must be based on principles. You just cannot do something by your whims and fancies. And a physician should be having certain uh, understandings, knowledge, the concepts very clear. That is regarding the knowledge of disease and all that sort we studied in aphorism 3 and 4. And in the 3 and 4, just have a look in the contents, just to know that how Hahnemann has joined together aphorism 3 and 4, and he just gave a synopsis of both the aphorisms in with just few words in one sentence. He says for 3 and 4, he must investigate what is to be cured in disease and know what is curative in various medicines in order to be able to adopt the later to the former, and must also understand how to preserve the health of human beings. He clubbed it because all those 5 points are together, they are not separate. And now let's just have a, because fifth we are going to start, we will be starting the fifth aphorism by the synopsis given in the contents by the master. Attention to exciting and fundamental causes and other circumstances as helps to cure. Attention to exciting and fundamental causes and other circumstances as helps to cure. As we said, the first sub block of 5 to 18 is 5 to 8, that is regarding the blueprint of the case taking. And in the blueprint of case taking, definitely he is just going to teach us regarding the cause of the disease. As I told you in the aphorism 4, what we are going to study, cause of the disease. In the sixth, we are going to study portrait of disease. Seventh, we are going to study totality of symptoms. Eighth, we are going to study restoration of health. So let us start with the fifth. Now, when we are going to discuss about the causes of the disease, here Hahnemann is not really talking any cause as per the old school, as per the Western medicine. He is not talking that way. He is in a very different areas. He's going to teach us that how to understand the cause. So let us start. Once you read this, and you will come to know, and you will be coming up with certain questions. So what is that? 5. Useful to the physician in assisting him to cure. We just see he's continuing with one word all the time: cure, cure, cure. Useful to the physician in assisting him to cure are the particulars of the most probable exciting cause of the acute disease. 1. What are the points useful for the physicians to achieve the mission, that is cure? He says in acute, the useful thing is to understand the most probable exciting cause. What generally we do in our understanding, we remove and reduce the word most probable, we remove and we remember exciting cause. That's a very big mistake we do. He is here with this word, which are, you will notice that exciting cause is in the italics, but then the most probable are in ordinary, but then you cannot remove that. It has its own meaning. We will be discussing that. Then, as also, similarly, in the chronic diseases, what is important? The most significant points in the whole history of chronic disease. So, just make a point now. When you are dealing with the acute case, a case coming to you with the acute presentation, what is useful for a physician to understand is regarding the most probable exciting cause. And if when you're dealing with the chronic disease, then in that chronic disease, you're going into the whole history of the patient. We, all of us, we take all the history. We note down all the points, all that happenings in his life, all kind of accidents, all kind of events, all kind of happenings, all kind of emotional setbacks, everything we note down. Then finally we think what is to be considered and what is not to be considered. He made it very clear with respect of chronic diseases. You are to look into the most significant points. Out of those different points, because patient is able to remember all those points, definitely they are significant. But my job as a homeopathic physician, my job as the rational physician, my job as a judicious physician is to come out the most significant. You have to understand the meaning and the difference between significant and the most significant. That is why in Materia Medica, when some medicines are written like this, since never be well after this, since never be well after this, what is that? Nothing but the most significant point. So in acute, what is the need? In acute conditions, the need is to know the most probable exciting cause. And in the chronic, you are to note down the most significant points in the whole history of the case. Please read the whole aphorism from the beginning. Useful to the physician in assisting him to cure are the particulars of the most probable exciting cause of the acute disease, as also the most significant points in the whole history of the chronic disease. Why? To make the physician enabled, to make the physician equipped, to make the things possible. What things? To make the cure possible, he says, to enable him to discover its fundamental cause, which is generally due to chronic miasm. So ultimately, when I said you that we are going to study the aphorisms, the next block 5 to 18, which is regarding the knowledge of disease, the doctrinal part of this knowledge of disease. What is the first if given in aphorism 3? In that, the first sub block is 5 to 8. That is called the blueprint of case taking. In the blueprint of case taking, the first aphorism, that is the fifth aphorism, is regarding the causes of the disease. What are those causes of the disease? We are to focus in two different ways depending on the presentation of the case. If the presentation of the case is acute, we are to focus on the most probable exciting cause. It is always there. We shouldn't be missing it. And this way we are able to make out the most probable exciting cause. But then when the presentation of the case is chronic, then our job as a homeopathic physician, as a rational physician, is to find out the fundamental cause, which is generally due to chronic miasm. When we talk chronic disease, regarding the word chronic, if we go into the literal meaning of it comes from the chrono, it is related to the duration, a longer duration. But then in homeopathy, when we talk chronic, it is more related, more important to see that in this chronic presentation of the disease, whether that chronic miasm is there or not. That is the difference between the understanding of chronic disease with the other system of medicines and in homeopathy. And when we say the chronic disease because of the chronic miasm, that is only the true chronic disease, true natural chronic disease. So when we are going to study all that, we will be coming to that point also. Then in the acute condition, means when the presentation of the disease is with sharper symptoms. Acute word means sharp. When it is there, the first thing is somebody is coming to you, say having fever. So when somebody is coming to you, he may be having a fever, say 100 or 101 or 104 something. It cannot be like this for months together. But then when he says that he has a fever for last 5 days, maybe he is coming to you leaving the other treatment. But then disease is the recent one. The presentation is recent one. We next thing is to find out what could be the most probable cause, most probable exciting cause. So first of all, let us understand regarding the exciting cause, or let us first understand the meaning of cause. What do you mean by cause? I wish that every one of you must understand and study the cause and effect relationship. What is that cause and effect relationship? I just tell you in the nutshell. The cause and effect relationship is in the chain. The cause is producing certain effects. These certain effects becomes the cause for the next level of effects. And then that next level effect becomes the cause for further level of effects. So it is in the complete relationship of a chain. So when patient is coming to you with the fever, high fever, very hot head and neck, having dullness, no thirst, sleepy, in that condition, all these what I just told you, we call it symptom. What are they? They are the effects. If we go asking how it started, he might say few things. Initially, most of the patients say we don't know. But then if you ask them very carefully, with very judicious questions, your question framing is very, very important here. This question framing, we are going to learn the practical part. So, on asking very carefully, he will tell a few of the things. He may say that fever started 3 days back. Before that, there was a rain, and I just went out to get wet in the rain. I like rain or whatever he his choice, but then he exposed himself to the rain. You should not be hurrying, because this much may not be enough. Maybe while getting wet in the rain, the mother or a father rebuked him, "What are you doing?" And that person is very sensitive. Or while in the rain, suddenly a very heavy thunderstorm occurred, and he suddenly get terrified with that. Or got drenched in the rain and immediately came out some important work. He thought, let me complete the work. He kept himself in the wet cloth for some hour or half an hour or so. So you can understand, as I am telling you, though it is just the hypothetical example, but then quite possible. I hope you will agree with me that this is quite possible. So, in these circumstances, you should not be hurrying to immediately pick up because I got the cause, exciting cause. Let me just go to the remedy. No, it's not that way. Then, various possibilities. Like, for example, we come to know that the fever came. We will be coming to know after some 5 days or so that it is typhoid. Then, just taking the exciting cause day before fever started has no meaning because every infectious disease has some incubation period. If I am remembering correct, then regarding the typhoid fever, we should be getting the details at least a 1 week before. So it is a very, very tricky thing, exciting cause. And when we say the most probable, that means we can never be very sure all the time that this one is the only exciting cause. This is not possible. There can be some 5, 10, or such number of exciting causes. Out of that, you are to pick up the most probable one. They have their own value. We will be discussing it in the practical part. Now, once you understood that exciting cause, eliciting the exciting cause is not that easy as we have been thinking. Exciting causes, you need lot of patience and lot many questions from the patient, at least some 2 weeks before we should start asking. The fever is for 3 days. When fever started day one, before that 2 weeks, we need to know the most probable exciting cause. And in every area, you have to find it out because it can be mental, it can be physical. You have to find out in so many areas. When you say the exciting cause, what is that exciting meaning here? That means that some or the other such event, such cause, which has only one capacity, that is to excite. That's it. To excite what? To excite the miasm. That is what the most important understanding regarding the acute disease. Acute disease and the true natural chronic disease are not two separate entities. No, they are related. The only difference is when the true natural chronic disease is in slumber and because of certain causes, which Hahnemann is saying the exciting causes, sometime gets excited and a flare in a very acute form comes up This is called acute disease. The chronic disease is one such thing which remains the basis without which even acute disease cannot come, without which that cause is not going to harm you. If, suppose, let us take an example, somebody is free from the miser, got drenched in the rain, or ate something wrong. So, whatever may be the cause exciting, that may only play with the physiology, and the only our physiological powers will correct it. Nothing will happen. Does not require any such medication. Or even if it comes, proper disease comes, then definitely the chronic miasm is there inside. It depends on the degree of the expression of or the explosion of the chronic miasm. That degree will decide that it is going to be subsided easily or it will be very difficult and may lead to complications. When we read in practice of medicine, complications of the disease, complication of measles, complication of typhoid, complication of chickenpox, complication of this viral fever or this diarrhea or cholera and all are nothing but when the transient explosion is not a transient one, rather, it is the bigger one. Complication is nothing but the chronic miasm has become awakened. That is called complication. This is how we should be understanding in the practice of medicine what they say in the Western medicine, that these are the complications, does not happen in everyone, but then there are this percentage they have observed, which may vary time to time, that this kind of complication may come in such and such disease. That means in those patients where Myism is not simply slumbering. Myism is not simply exploding transiently. That means the excitement of the cause was so much that myism got awakened. And when it gets awakened, it is a complication. And see, most of the complications are not well treated, are generally not treatable in the Western medicine. But many of the patients, when they go to a homeopathic doctor for this complication, they get very good results. So my point of view is to understand the meaning and the importance of the exciting cause. One should not be hurrying about finding out the exciting cause. You have to be very careful. The best way is that you can draw a line, whatever the acute disease patient is coming, maybe some 2 weeks prior to the beginning of the acute disease, you should be smart enough talking to him. You should be smart enough, I mean, patient should not be thinking that this doctor is asking the irrelevant questions. You may be smart enough to be asking him, what were you doing for last 2 weeks. You were playing, everything was all right, everything all right in the school, college, or whatever the job he is in. Any untoward event happened, and like this, you keep on asking certain quick questions. Definitely, something will come up. Maybe he will say that I am a shopkeeper, and some 10 days back there was some kind of spat, some kind of quarrel in the shop with somebody came, and thereafter I was upset, my BP raised, and then this days after I started with the fever, and now doctor, I am told to go the test, and the test has come that typhoid is positive. So we need to be very careful asking the questions, finding out the exciting cause. Be sure it will not be just one. Out of those many, you are to judge which is that one which can be most probable to lead to this excitement of the sleeping miser, presenting itself with a transient explosion that is called acute disease. I hope this understanding is first of all required with this aphorism. There can be so many questions around this, and it should be. But then keep this thought, this very principle in the mind regarding the investigation of acute disease. And then regarding the chronic conditions. In the chronic conditions, this is very important to understand the most significant points in the history of whole disease. Let's take an example. A patient is coming having migraine for last 10 years. Patient is of some 25-30 years. Female patient having clear cut features of migraine for the 10 years. And now you are asking the question regarding the life, and whatever she can remember, she is telling you about what is all happening in his whole life. While telling, patient may tell so many details that when I was in the seventh class, I got a quarrel with my friends, and I was upset for 10 days. Then she's saying in the 10th class, when I was in some class test, I was expecting in the science 10 out of 10, but then I got 9 on 10. I got very depressed with that because my everything was all right. My teacher is doing a partiality with me, and there can be many such events in the life. You may listen very seriously to the patient, and you will write it down very thoroughly on his case sheet, on her case sheet. But then, what is important out of all? That is only Henman very nicely pinpointed. Out of this, say, 10 events, you are to take the most significant one. How to understand the most significant one? What are the criteria going to decide that this is the most significant one and rest are just more or only significant, not to be taken into account. All that we will be learning in very thorough manner when we will be going into the practical part, but then a little bit of glimpse is required to understand this point. Like I just tell you this regarding the fight with the friends in the seventh class. And with very careful questioning, when you find out that when she had a fight with the friends, she just started with her menarche and she was into that flow, and this spat has occurred. And because of that emotional setback, that flow suddenly checked. Since then, whatever the headache, my periods are not in time, not proper, this problem, that problem. Now you think, out of whatever I just gave you the example, which becomes most significant? So obviously that which had an impact on you, and that impact is such, is quite expressive biologically in you, shown even today. This kind of things are most significant one in the whole history. And these significant points are to the part of case of the patient. I hope you got some idea about the most significant points in the whole history of chronic disease, because these most significant points are only going to decide about the discovery of fundamental cause, that is generally due to chronic miasm. In these investigations, what investigations? Investigation of the case, whether it is acute or chronic. In these investigations, there are certain points. You see, first is the ascertainable physical constitution of the patient in the bracket, especially when the disease is chronic. One point, that is physical constitution. Second one is his moral and intellectual character. Third one is occupation. Fourth one is mode of living and habits. Fifth one is social and domestic relations. Sixth one is age. Seventh one is sexual function. And the eighth one is etc. Are to be taken into considerations. So Hahnemann is giving you 7 areas from which you can find out the exciting causes and the fundamental causes, especially the fundamental cause. The first one, especially, that is the physical constitution. That is more and most important one in respect of chronic diseases, investigation of chronic diseases. So 7 points. What are these 7 points? This needs a proper discussion, understanding of this. Today, you should keep in mind to understand that what we discussed about is in this aphorism. This aphorism is talking regarding the causes of the disease when you are investigating a case. points. And in that investigation, what kind of presentation of the disease, if it is acute, you have to find out the cause, but then what cause? Most probable exciting cause. And when the presentation is of chronic condition, then you have to find out the fundamental cause. Fundamental cause means in homeopathy, one, that is chronic miasm. And how will you find out that fundamental cause? Out of the most significant points in the whole history of the disease. When patient is telling all the details, in that detail you have to note down most significant points. I give you one example. There are many, many. And it is n number of most significant points. Whatever I tell you, in a very, very novel case, it can be all different. But then only idea is that it should be the most significant. And in the investigations of these kind of causes, Henman has given you the seven areas. Seven areas. The first one is regarding how the patient looks, the height, the appearance, the expressions, the features, the complexion, all those, that is physical constitution. Especially very, very important when it is a chronic disease. Then rest of the six, the other one is his moral and intellectual character. It's a very lengthy thing to understand regarding the moral and intellectual character. Then what kind of occupation? We all read the occupational hazards. You are in too much of computers, you're all the time in the working of the computer. These radiations have got their effects. Somebody who is an X-ray technician, for a long time exposure to the X-ray, he may have some occupational hazard. Mode of living and habit, very important. And all these points are much more important in respect of chronic disease. But then definitely sometime our wrong mode of living can cause the acute condition also, acute disease also. His social and domestic relations, his age, sexual function, all these seven areas very important to investigate into, to find out the causes what we discussed. Then what is this last one, etc.? There is a lot of criticism regarding the organon, that how can a book which is some 200 years old to 50 years old, how can you say that even if today this book holds good? First of all, yes, it holds good. Then they say Henman could change it for many times had Henman been here today. All right, we can say so, yes. But then, since Henman knew that nobody can be immortal to remain on the earth all the time and keep changing organ, so keeping that view in his mind, he knew the fact. What he did, that maybe in the time to come, what categories I have made, these seven categories, there can be another eighth category, maybe ninth category, maybe 10th category, maybe whatever. So he wrote here, etc., to tell us you add that category which was not there in the time of Henry. So he left the scope, and he left so many scope in the whole of the organon using this word, etc. What is etc.? etc. means and so on. In Hindi, if I say, it means vagera vagera. Means whatever else I have not written here, you can add. So in the whole of the Ognon, some 108, 108, etc. are given. That means some 108 places Henman has given the scope for any such edition. I'm thankful to my teacher to teach me the Ognon in this fashion. So these are the important areas to keep in mind. In this new furthering in our voyage, we are going to learn regarding the first point of the blueprint in aphorism 3, that is the knowledge of disease. This block is majorly from 5th aphorism to the 18th aphorism. This can be, for the learning purpose, we can further subdivide 5 to 8 and 9 to 18. 5 to 8 is what? 5 to 8 is regarding the investigation of the disease, or you can say blueprint of the case taking. And in this blueprint of case taking, the first aphorism, fifth, is regarding the causes of the disease, cause of the disease. And 9 to 18 aphorisms are though pertaining to the knowledge of disease, but then that is regarding the doctrine of vital force. We will be understanding the concept of disease, health. You can't understand disease without understanding health. Because any alteration we can only understand when we know the baseline, that is health. So we have to understand health in a very dynamic manner. Unlike to the old school, they were very static about all this. Even now they are static. Even now I referred you the second chapter of PSM, that community medicine park and park. Even then the present definition of WHO is not to that extent that modern as Henman has given the definition of health. We will be discussing at the right time. So, understanding health is very important with the point of view of vital force, that is, with the dynamic point of view. Once you understand health dynamically, you can understand disease dynamically. And you can understand how this dynamic can be cured with the dynamic medicine. So, that block of the aphorism, though pertaining to the knowledge of disease, but then that is regarding the very, very basics, the basic doctrine of the knowledge of disease. So, two things we are going to study in this. This voyage is up to the understanding of disease regarding the dynamic causes of it, regarding the dynamicity of the very concept of health and disease and cure. This is what we are going to study. And in this couple of lectures, focus yourself into these points so that when we understand this, that means we will be able to accomplish the understanding of the first if regarding the knowledge of disease in a very, very dynamic manner, unlike the static manner as the other school understand. If we are able to understand the concept of disease in a very dynamic fashion, our outlook towards watching a patient, understanding his disease will be altogether different, which is required. This is what is the aim of learning the Ogdom. We can always say that very good case checking, go to Hutchinson, go to Kedas, very good. They are also very good books. But then those books are lacking that dynamic understanding. Those books are going to be very, very useful for all of us once we imbibe this very dynamic concept in us. So, this is what the beginning I just started with. For the new destination, we started in our voyage another further destination without taking uh, any kind of halt. We are not breaking the journey. We are in continuation of the journey. We will be taking up tomorrow discussing regarding these 7 points one by one in little more detail to understand these points, because until we understand these 7 points, we cannot do a very good case taking. We cannot really do a case perceiving. It's very, very important. So let us take of today's some comments. I'm seeing here not much today comments. Any questions you can write me. Only Twinkle Goyal is saying, sir, when we say transient explosion of the latent sora for acute disease, is there always a latent sora behind this? Of course. See, when you say latent sora, mm, all the chronic miasms, all the three chronic miasms has got three different stages. The primary stage, when not properly treated, not homeopathically treated, leads to the secondary sora. In the secondary sora, the first stage is suddenly a primary does not become secondary. Primary stage, when wrongly treated, becomes the latent one, latent condition of the sora. And this latent conditions, by and by taking time, becomes secondary stage of the miasm. So when we say latent sora, it means that it is sleeping, just changing a position. When you sleep, you change a position. No? So that change of a position, but you are still in sleep. You do not know you changed the position. You didn't wake up. The changing the position, you can just understand with this example. That is what the transient explosion. And when you wake up, stand up. If you go with this example, when the same thing happens with the miasm, say sora, where that is the secondary stage. Now it is full blown. And mind it, all other kind of non-homeopathic treatment work in a transient explosion. In that almost slept state of the miasm. Once the miasm becomes secondary and woken up, no non-homeopathic treatment helps. No help. When the patient comes to you getting frustrated from non-homeopathic treatments, you just can understand how that condition is so important, that because the miasm is not in a transient state, it is not just in sleeping state, it has woken up. So now start understanding things combining together. There is nothing separate chambers, watertight chambers. Understanding of the medicine is the most important thing required. That concept of holism in us. Because the concept of holism, altogether related, is the only truth. Rest is the partial understanding. Rest is Maya. Tinkle says, and when, sir, we talk about intensity upon which the acute disease depends and its complications, sir, it can be just latent sora or any other miasm also. See, miasms are three. Hahnemann spoke Sora, Sora, Sora because he had so much of understanding of Sora. But then in Hahnemann's time, it was more the Sora which was working. But then now the stage is that rest of the two miasms are into that kind of giant position like Sora. So that can be the other miasms also. You just cannot say only Sora. That can be rest of with all the three miasms. Hahnemann wrote Sora only because he had the experience with the Sora. See, the syphilitic miasm in the present generation, for the present generation, it broke out in 16th century only. And the Columbus and his crew, after the discovery of America, came to Europe, Paris, and when they were there in America, where they discovered that area, there people were living in the America with this infection, trapinoma, and it was trapinoma those days in that newly discovered place, America. It was in commensal state. They were people and trapinoma were friends living together, and they contracted. Did not know. In very celebrations mode, they reached Paris and they distributed the disease around, and that is how the syphilis broken out. You can imagine the same days in Paris experienced as we all are experiencing the COVID 19. So, and with the time, the disease transformed, people's response to the disease transformed. But then the very nature of the disease, that once it will attack you, it will not leave you until treated with exact homeopathic treatment. Nothing else will work. Then Winkle says further, yeah, sir, actually we have read in books always explosion of latent sora. That is why this was my query, the correct query. Yeah. Benita Goyal, sir, as discussed yesterday, if we prescribe constitutional remedy to the person in health, can it prevent transient explosion? Yes, that is what the purpose. Hellman says when we are going further, and suppose if we could make it to learn chronic disease, what is that latent state? It is that stage when the disease is in the seedling form. You are to cut the disease at the nip. That is the point. Don't allow it to grow. That is what the purpose is, treating with the constitutional remedy in the prescribing in the healthy stage, in the well stage, in the wellness treatment of homeopathy means to remove the miasm in its latent stage. What is that latent stage? It is quite prominent. Some children coming to you as a patient, you find them pale, face is pale, their appetite is varied, they have a very moody state of mind. The female started with menarche, her periods are irregular, means whatever may be the variety of irregularity, early, delayed, or whatever. But as such, there is no such entity to be called as disease, that having fever, having swelling, having that, or having this. No. This is all latent. And take note of all these points and treat it. If you're able to remove all this, see, even if those who are having good food, they are also anemic. Why? The other school is distributing very seriously all the iron tablets. People are popping these tablets very religiously, but anemia is not going. Why? Because the deficiency is not that iron is not supplied in the food. The difficulty is the system is unable to assimilate. When the system is unable to assimilate is a mism, the latent one, the latent stage of the mism. And once somebody is taking the pill and becoming all right, there is no paleness in the face. That means by sheer non-supply of the food which has been supplied. It is that simple. So you can call this poor assimilation as constitutional deficiency, or there are many words used. Whatever, whether somewhere something wrong with the metabolism, so much of iron is there in the GIT and it is coming out next day when you're going to the loo, it is pushed off. The metabolism and the body system did not care to absorb it. You supplied but then not taken. Taken but not properly utilized. All those kind of things. So we will be discussing all these things. Just keep understanding regarding what we started today. That is regarding the causes of the disease. Tomorrow we will try to discuss in detail about the 7 areas where we can find out the causes, and these areas are very important to understand and keep in mind while we are doing a case perceiving, maybe a acute case, maybe a chronic case. So for today, thank you very much everyone for your patient listening. uh, we will be continuing like this as far as possible. We will be able to really pick up all these doctrinal part aphorisms very quickly, and we will be understanding them thoroughly, and we will be raising many questions to make our understanding crystal clear. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone. Thank you. Bye bye.